From West Georgia RESA. I want to do a quick audio check. If you can hear me, can you press the little hand raise sign if you can see it? Oh, good. Okay. I'll assume then that I'm working with the audio. Welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. This is our second run of this Differentiation Strategies 3 for the Road webinar. The design of our 3 for the Road webinars are essentially to provide 3 quick strategies, but also, of course, to try to pack in as much information and as support as we possibly can. This will be a very short webinar. We're designed to go about 30 minutes. It always seems to take me a little bit longer than 30 minutes to do 30 minutes worth of work, so I'm going to have to work at a rather fast clip, so I apologize if I'm speaking rapidly. I just have a lot to share that I'm excited to share with you. If you can see the screen here, then you will note that there is an optional reflection document. It's a graphic organizer that some of you might want to use to take notes if that's your learning style. And then also all of the resources that are a part of this PowerPoint and also a session recording can be found at that URL listed at the bottom slide. You will also get an email at the end of this session with the URLs provided again. So that's pretty much how we will run, and I'll go ahead and get started. This is one of my favorite little signs. Clear learning targets. If you can hit this sign, you will hit that bridge. I like this sign as a starting point for differentiation because one of the foundations of differentiation is to make it very clear what students are to do and to let them in on how far they are from that target, so that the formative assessment that you do in the classroom to give you an indication of where they are is also shared with them so that they know where they are. Our purpose for this webinar is to share resources for teacher teams and for schools. Those of you who are seeking to develop a common definition of differentiation and its look-fors. And of course, we are compelled to do this for many reasons. For one thing, it improves student achievement. And then also it is part of our teacher performance standards with the TEKS, standard number 4 for differentiation. And so we have some essential questions that I imagine you can already guess. We are thinking about, as we're listening to this webinar, what are the look-fors of a differentiated classroom? How might we utilize these resources as we organize ongoing professional learning for differentiation at our school? So there's going to be an introduction where we're going to try to offer suggested common definitions, some beliefs and key ideas. We're then going to examine 3 strategies, and then we'll talk about what other options you have beyond this webinar that we would like to provide for you. Okay, so let's start with something very important, and that is the beliefs of differentiation. In order to actually perform differentiation in a classroom and to do that well, you have to believe a few things. For one, you have to believe that it is a research-based practice and that it will improve student achievement. You have to believe also that it is not only fair, but that it is perhaps the definition of fair. And that's something that's difficult for us to get around at first because differentiation does mean different experiences for different students. The end goal of instruction is maximize progress for all students. That is a sound belief of differentiation, and it is different from the belief system that we might have inherited from school over the many years. And it takes a growth mindset that we have to believe that all students can learn. And also, you have to believe that changing the level of differentiation is also going to change a few other things in your classroom, and that those changes are positive. For example, the more we increase our purposeful planning, as I like to call differentiation, I'm not the first person to call it that, but I just like that, that term. It does affect other realms of teaching. For example, it might change as you increase the level of your own implementation of differentiation in classroom. It might change how you want to talk to students, how you want to pre-assess, how you want to communicate progress to teachers, how you want to speak about designing common assessments with your peers. Okay, so here's a working definition, and one of the purposes of this webinar is for you guys to take this information after the fact and talk about what kind of language you would like to use in your school. But here's a suggested working definition for differentiation. Differentiation may be defined as a teaching philosophy, belief system, or approach. But basically, it's when a teacher anticipates that students are different, knows that then, because of those differences, he or she is going to have to measure and know those differences, and then decides to honor those differences by designing experiences that individual students or like groups need, and to do all of that in spite of the fact that we have inherited a strong belief and a strong previous system that school is a place where students are given identical content, work, and assessments. That's the paradigm we come from as adults, and so we have to work against that. And it reminds me of this proverb, a Hebrew proverb. Do not confine your children to your own learning, for they were born in another time, which is just a nice reminder to us that things are different for many reasons, including the fact that this world that the students are inheriting is different. So what does it require of the teacher? Well, if you're going to implement differentiation more frequently, more effectively, more thoughtfully, you have to be more in tune with your students. You have to listen. You have to be more flexible. Listening, watching, being flexible, having more resources at your disposal, being more transparent about what you're doing and why you're doing it. The students are going to notice differentiation is increasing, and they're going to ask questions about it. And they're going to want answers from you that assure them that they are an important part of the classroom. And it requires us to be more intentional and more tolerant of multiple enterprises going on at once. So what are the components of differentiation? Well, the good news is that when instruction and assessment become really inseparable, then differentiation naturally follows. When you have ongoing, accurate assessment and checks for understanding, whether they be formal, like some kind of multi-question pretest, or whether they're very informal by just having conversations with students and seeing what language they use, or even asking students to give, a thumbs up, thumbs down, or to move to this side of the room if you still want more help, etc. So regardless of how you do your formative assessments, when formative assessment is ongoing, then the instruction follows along. Effective teacher feedback and commentary is also a vital component of differentiation. For students have to know where they are at all times, and they find that out through the language you choose in your feedback and your commentary. And then, of course, purposeful planning, informed by these unique conditions. It also requires of us a documentation of progress. We have to have some means by which we are not only measuring where people are in terms of their mastery of the standards, but also we have to have that written down somewhere. In whatever format makes sense to us, we have to keep the measuring stick. We have to keep the results so that when we conduct formative assessment, it gives us a general sense of where kids are, but it also provides us some specific data that we actually keep and use. And teachers who are great differentiators consider everything they do an assessment. Every conversation they have with a kid is an opportunity for that teacher to learn more about where the student is. So everything that happens in the class can be an assessment. There are a lot of great books that provide us with the content and the newest thinking on differentiation. If you go to the website where the PowerPoint is housed, then you will see that we have created a resources document that includes all of the books and articles that we've used to gather this information, and it might make for a great list for your professional library. And mostly differentiation is just admitting that differences happens every day, every time, and the question is just what are we going to do with those differences? Are we going to ignore them and move forward with a plan that was constructed by us as teachers before we saw levels of difference, or are we going to address the differences? Here's a nice analogy for us. Differentiation classroom is like a jazz ensemble. It's not like a marching band. And in that sense, it's exciting, but it's not quite as easy to predict. The teacher also is an important part of that. Okay, this slide is to remind us that differentiation is part of Tier 1. It is what everybody gets in their regular classroom. It is part of a standards-based classroom. Yep, there it is. And also, therefore, it is actually a part of RTI. It is part of Tier 1, and then also changes in differentiation are planned at tiers higher than 1 as well. Here are a few things that I think are helpful. There are a bulleted list here of things that differentiation is not. And sometimes having non-examples is a great way to get a better handle on something. But it doesn't mean that we're letting the students run the show. It doesn't mean that we're just letting some kids get off scot-free with very little work and other kids, piling it on just because they're capable of it. It doesn't mean that we've got all these great resources for high performers and we're just going to, use what we can for everyone else. It certainly doesn't mean abandoning full group teacher-led instruction. There is always a place and a time for everyone to get together, and yes, even for the teacher to just be teacher-directed for a little while. If that's what the kids need at this moment, then it's perfectly okay to have full group work. It's just that in a differentiated classroom, that's not the norm. And it's definitely not a complete individualization of instruction, different lesson for each kid every day. That just would not be possible. So, the what and the why. This is a great way for us to really zero in on what differentiation looks like. Differentiation is when the teacher changes 4 things and does so because of 4 things. And so what are those 4 things and why are we changing? Well, the 4 things that get changed in a differentiated classroom is the content, the process, the product, or the learning environment. This slide is incredibly helpful with its definition and description. There are also some additional slides that take each piece of this and provide look-fors and lists. You can find those PowerPoint slides on the website, which again, at the end of the session, you will get a thank you email that will repeat the URL for the website. But there is an important distinction we have to make here, and that is between content and the standard. Strategically altering content does not mean changing the standard. It just means you're changing the level of expectation and required experience and thinking involved in assigned work that sometimes might accelerate or serve as a curriculum compact, might add more complex considerations, more depth to exploration, or perhaps less, perhaps more structure, more support. And I'm going to need to fix my typo there. It's the College of William and Mary where we got that information. So one quick note about gifted students who demonstrate that they need different content, same standards, of course, but different content, you wouldn't want to give them extra work and have them do regular work and that extra work. Instead, you would simply have an alternative to regular work. So it's not in addition to. So why are we making these changes? Well, it's because of individual differences in readiness, interest, learning preference, and goal. There are a lot of terms that are interchangeable with this. Sometimes people say skill, differences in student skill, differences in student ability. That, of course, is readiness. Learning goal. A lot of books are starting to use the language of learning goal lately, and I like to think of learning goal as something school-structured, like perhaps part of an IEP or part of a 504 or part of a gifted contract or part of something that has been clearly articulated as an additional goal for that student. Even something as simple as, knowing that this student has not yet passed a writing test and wanting to just make sure they have more practice with writing. That could be a learning goal. We can assess for these things. We can check their readiness with all kinds of formative assessment. We can ask their interest in either formal surveys or centers, learning profiles, or we can simply just be observant and notice where the students are doing their best work. So this is a very simple 4x4 chart here, just 16 different cells that show what options we have for differentiation. So maybe we are changing the learning environment and we're doing it because of differences in students' learning and how they learn, their preference for learning. And so that would be an indication of that kind of a change. Or maybe we're differentiating by changing the content and doing so because of readiness. And maybe we're changing the product because the student is interested in a different product. So this is just a little example of how the different changes and choice and reasons for changes can be paired up. It's always good for us to look directly at our rubric. The TEKS rubric for proficiency on standard number 4 for differentiation uses some pretty specific language. In proficient, of course, it's a matter of the teacher consistently challenging and supporting each student's learning. And then with exemplary, this is more than just consistent, this is continual. But I wanted to point out here that there is some specific language in the proficient descriptor. It says appropriate content. And in exemplary, it says, in addition to that, needs and interest. So I just wanted to point out that even though there might be 16 different ways for us to pair up what is changed and why it is changed, there seems to be in an examination of standard number 4 an indication that the preferred method, or at least emphasized method, would be to change the content, and perhaps to do that because of needs, which would imply readiness, and then also interests. Okay, so now we're finally at the place where we can talk about our 3 strategies, and they're very similar. I chose these 3 because they're 3 that deal with content changes, and the first one is differentiation by tiered assignments. The second one is differentiation by a frame of reference perspective, and the third by customizing vocabulary. So strategy number 1, tiered instruction. I really love Tomlinson's analogy here of tiered instruction being like a wedding cake, all one flavor, the same color icing, but multi-layered. So students can be doing this, the same work, addressing the same standard, getting the same diet, if you will, and the same menu. They might even have the same exact same size of cake, but coming from different tiers, coming from different layers. The intention of a tiered assignment is for when the teacher realizes that it is time for the kids to get a really great taste of success. It is when you set the students up for a challenge that will mean something to them, but one that you know that they will succeed with. And the reasoning for that is that once students have a taste of a challenge that they have succeeded with, that will continue to drive their motivation, or at least that's the theory behind it, because humans do crave to be competent at something. And sometimes a very special activity has to be designed so that a student will be ensured of success at his or her level. And it is differentiation of content by readiness. There's a framework here that's helpful for tiered assignments, and basically it says, first identify your outcomes, of course. Think about the standards you're addressing. Think about what you need students to know and do and be able to understand. Then provide an initial instruction for everyone, perhaps a group activating strategy, something that is common to everyone. Then get a sense from a formative assessment of where students might fall in a readiness for working with this content or skill, and then design some small group assignments. 3 is sort of a magic number. It's not exactly necessary, but it makes sense to think in terms of 3 for tiered assignments, because if you were not going to do any differentiation at all, then that would probably be what you're gearing for proficient. And then if you scaffold in an additional way, then that helps somebody who might be at a basic level with this content. And then if you produce some kind of challenge that will include extending, evaluating, applying, considering hypotheticals, being more abstract, etc., then that's for an advanced learner. The slide pretty much shows the same thing. And of course, obviously, we're looking for a perfect fit. We don't want an activity that is so difficult that it's frustrating, and we don't want it to be so easy that it patronizes the student or has them feeling like we don't really know what they're capable of, or making them even bored. So who are you thinking of when you are planning for tiered instruction? You are thinking of those students who are working well already in the mainstream of the content for that unit. Then you're thinking of those students who have exhibited some extra knowledge, some additional aspects of understanding that you might need to address. And then looking for students who have shown through comment or work that they need additional supports because of lapses in knowledge or lack of practice with a skill. There also may be students who have special goals, special learning plans, and sometimes that means that they would get their own tier, but it's also true that sometimes they need just simply one of those 3 tiers. So what in the world can we change? You can change the materials, the form of expression, the level of complexity, the amount of structure, the number of steps it would take, the level of dependence, the time provided. And so what kind of things can we tier? Does it always have to be an activity? Well, no, we can tier an outside assignment. We can, of course, tier activities in the class. I love tiering homework because that's sort of a low-stakes place for the teacher to try out some new ideas with tiered assignments. Experiments can be tiered, the materials themselves can be tiered, assessments can be tiered, and writing prompts. That's just a little list there. There's some guidelines for tiered assignments. I think that they've been implied in the previous slides, so you can look at these later. But basically, you do have a time when there is a common understanding or skill, and then from there, the tiered assignment is provided to students. Here's a few examples. I really like that these examples are not called Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. They're also not called the orange group, the blue group, the red group, which kids, very quickly learn what that means. It's not a bad thing for kids to know that they are working in a top group, but when you don't have to drive so much attention to that, then it's good sometimes to just avoid it. For example, this task is called the What About You task, and the teacher can say, I'm going to need all the folks working on the What About You task to come over here. And then the one-day task, and then the now and then task. You can see in the middle of the road assignment here that the students are pretending they're living in colonial times, and they're describing a typical day. And of course, they're doing that from some text or passage that they've been given or some previous evidence or information. The students who need more support are thinking about what they would have liked during the colonial period and writing about that. And then the now and then kids are comparing and contrasting, which is an additional step. Here's a kindergarten example. Whereas you might have the Who Is Here group doing a count, you might have the boys and girls group doing not only a count of what is there, but what is not there by counting an absence, which for kindergartner, that would be an additional step. This is a great little graphic. It reminds us of what we can change when we are tiering assignments. This is like a little slide, and I can move it and consider it in my mind. Am I going to make something more foundational or more transformational? Am I going to give a concrete assignment or activity or homework, or am I going to give a more abstract comment, activity or homework? Am I going to add levels of complexity, or am I going to keep it simple? Am I going to have multiple facets of info that the student has to work with, or am I going to have essentially just one facet of info? Am I going to want the students to take only a small leap of logic, or am I going to set up a scenario where you would have to make a lot of inferences in order to know how to move forward? Then, of course, you have more open-ended or more structured, having less independence or a great deal of independence, and then even the speed at which you have something work. And for the sake of time, I'm going to move a little bit faster. This is a really great ASCD tiered activity complete form for teachers to fill out that walks them through how to do this, and that is linked on the website as well. Okay, strategy 2. We're getting there. This is the frames of reference strategy, and it's really a very simple idea. Those of you who are a Thinking Maps school or who have had Thinking Maps training before will easily recognize this idea as being part of that initiative, but it does not require any sort of formal training with Thinking Maps or anything like that. A frame of reference, checking with the dictionary just to give us a reminder, that's all of the aspects, the structure, the concepts, the values, the customs, the views, everything from which an individual or group would perceive or evaluate data. So the idea behind this differentiation strategy is that when you change or add a frame of reference, you are adding additional content, or you are scaffolding content, or you are extending content. So let's look at some examples. It's changing the perspective. So this is a little work sample from a student in first grade. And initially the student had been given the task, write a reading response. And the student writes, "My favorite part of Geraldine the Music Mouse is when Geraldine found the giant piece of Parmesan cheese. She asked her friends to help her carry it into her hideout, and she would give them a big piece." Well, that's nice work for a first grader. So nice, in fact, that maybe the teacher is realizing that the student needs a bigger challenge. There is an implied frame of reference whenever you have a student do something. It is simply the frame of reference from themselves. You pretend you're a student in a class. I'm going to pretend I'm the teacher. You pretend you are doing this assignment. It's just very straightforward. But you can assign an additional frame of reference, sometimes by simply just putting a big rectangle around either finished work or work that has not begun, and then provide a few words of an explanation here. So the teacher would have to teach the idea, and after a few times the students would get used to it. But the student would know then that when she is handed back her work and it says hunk of cheese, that now she's supposed to write a reading response not as if she is herself, Brooke, the first grader, but she is to pretend that she is the hunk of cheese and write a reading response to the book from that perspective. It is an additional layer or level. It requires inference and extension. Multiple frames of reference can be applied. In this example, the student had worked in a group with folks to draw everything they knew about Ethiopia, and then the teacher came along, noticed that they were finished and that they had done a nice job, and so said, "I'm going to add a frame of reference for you. Please draw a big rectangle around your work, and I'm going to write on the side, how do you know that? At the bottom, why is this important? And on the right, what is influencing the information in your map?" So students can be taught a number of frame of reference questions, or they can be provided to them. But these questions are generic enough that they can be used in almost any content. Why is this important? When would you use this information? Who would be most interested in this information? What is influencing your work, etc. Here's a simple before and after frame of reference. The teacher perhaps worked with a group of kids and said, let's practice with the number 7, and now I want you to do it with the number 10, but show me how you would have made a 10 before you did the math lab. Now show me how you would make 10 after the math lab. And so the student is being metacognitive and thinking about how the thinking has changed, and showing visually that there has been an additional or change in their own frame of reference from before and after an activity. I love to use frames of reference for text. because, at all grades we are reading, and in all subjects we are reading, particularly now with Common Core. We are reading a great deal in our science, social studies, CTAE, etc. And sometimes it is wonderful, of course, to know a student's Lexile level and to consider and choose something just for them to read. But when that's not possible, and when you need everybody to read the same thing for whatever reason, you can offer a frame of reference by changing the reading purpose. So for students who are struggling readers with this particular set of paragraphs, I would have them annotate for the evidence of Sherman-Alexie's intelligence. And that question, that frame of references or reading purpose is given to them because the answer to that is very evident, very clear, and very surface. However, in the same 3 paragraphs, or 2 paragraphs here, there is an implied description of Sherman-Alexie's socioeconomic status. But in order to find that information, in order to annotate for that evidence, you have to have a deeper ability or understanding. So just changing the frame of reference for a text is a great way to amp up or even to make more simple the task of reading. Okay, finally, we're at our strategy 3, differentiated vocabulary. And we know from Marzano's research that there are a lot of characteristics of effective vocabulary instruction. For one, the most effective way to learn vocabulary is not to, get with the flashcards and have the word and the definition written and to simply try to put that into your brain, but instead a more effective, deeper vocabulary instruction involves students representing what they know about words in linguistic and non-linguistic ways, drawing pictures, acting words out, discussing words. It involves a gradual shaping of word meanings and also direct teaching of word parts. So here's an example of differentiation of vocabulary from a word list. This is a reminder that sometimes vocabulary instruction is spoken of in terms of tiers, but there are some basic words that if you're just here on the planet, you're going to run into them at some point. Then there are some high utility words. Usually you find these in text. And then there are some academic content words, and you find them in the specialty text of your unit. And so just knowing what kind of vocabulary you want students to focus on, what tier, is very important. And research has shown that for vocabulary acquisition, we do go through phases. We go from the I've never seen this word before phrase to I think I might have heard it, but I don't know what it means, to recognizing it like, oh yeah, my grandma uses that word when she's at church. It must be a church word, etc. Or knowing and using the word in conversation. One of the characteristics of a gifted learner is skipping some or all of these steps, which is really great. This is an example of a template that can be used over and over again, and there are lots of different ways to use it. The teacher might have put these words here, or the teacher might have presented a text and said, scan this before we read it, and choose 7 or 8 words that you would like to put on a personal vocabulary list. Or maybe the teacher said everyone needs to write down these first 3 words, but then now I want you to find 4 additional words. So the teacher can choose how that works. But this is a self-report pre-assessment where the teacher just tries to find out, where are you with these words? Have you ever heard them? Have you ever seen them? Do you sort of know what they mean? Could you define it if you had to? Is this a word that is part of your world already? And then from this pre-assessment, the teacher can either construct customized vocabulary list, or if there's no time to do that, the teacher can just say, well, now I want you to take all the words that you put in the first 3 columns, or that you checked here in the first 3 columns, and now those are your personal vocabulary words. Sorry about this thing keeps popping up. Okay, that's just to remind me to tell you that this template can be used over and over again with lots of different assignments or words. This is an example of a vocabulary activity. Everyone in the class can be doing the same vocabulary activity, but they might have different words. and the teacher might have assigned the word for the student, or the teacher might have said, I need for you to go get your customized list that we made the other day, and I need for you to choose 2 of those words and put 1 here and 1 here. And now all of you make a connection and explain your connection, draw a picture, think of how many ways you can use your own word, describe, etc. And of course then when students are working on different words, there then is a great opportunity for them to partner up in the last few minutes of class or whatever and share their work with one another. This is another template that can be easily used. It, whether it's for homework or in class, etc. The student can be given the term or from their list, or the teacher could say, here is a poem we're about to read. I want you to pick 1 word from the poem, describe it, draw it, put some related words or examples, etc. And this is a reminder that we do want to directly teach the word parts, and sometimes to have just a simple template like this where the students write their word and then they break down the prefixes and suffixes and the endings, etc. That can really help them build word knowledge. And this is an example of a little template for a vocabulary test. And there's lots of ways to use this as well. The teacher could put the 8 words here for the student, or for some students, the teacher might have put the first 4 words and then asked them to choose 4 others from their list. Or the teacher might have given this to a gifted learner and said, I know you know all these 15 words by heart by now, so go ahead and just from memory put 8 of them on here. And gifted kids love to show that they do in fact have all their vocabulary words memorized. So there's just lots of ways to play around with this. And then different things can be asked for on a vocabulary sheet like this. This 1 and 2 arrow is just simply a visual for write a sentence that explains the connection or the difference between words 1 and 2, words 2 and 3, words 3 and 4, etc. Or you could just simply have write a meaningful statement by using all of the 4 words. So that's just the templates. And now we're at the end of our very fast webinar. And I just want to share with you that there are a few things that you can opt to do at this point. We have taken this PowerPoint and some of these activities and resources, and we put them into a short online course for 1 PLU credit. That would be an estimated 10 hours of work. If you're interested in enrolling in that, then you go to this website here and just simply add your name, and then you'll get instructions on how to join that PLU session. Or you can simply extend your learning by revisiting the PowerPoint, printing out parts of it that you need, looking at the review of literature that we used, perhaps printing that out, looking at those special slides on content, process, product, and learning environment. All of those things, including a recording of this webinar, are found at tinyurl.com/3for-differentiation. I'm hoping also that you might have watched this in pairs or in small groups, and that you can then come back, talk about what you liked, talk about what you would like to change, share your ideas, calibrate your understanding, plan for how any of this information or these new ideas might be infused into your already routine practice and development of things like lesson plans and in common units, etc. Or you can think about how to keep track of some of these look-fors, like a consistent use of pretesting. How could we count how frequently we are pretesting or using any kind of formative assessment to inform differentiation in our school? How can we increase alternatives to differentiated alternatives for centers, homework, or contracts, etc.? And then finally, if you are a principal and you would like to have a customized experience for the special needs of your staff, then we can certainly differentiate the differentiation of PL. And if that's something that might help you, or if any of you would like any extra information or help that we might be able to support you with, then please feel free to email me. Thanks again for your time. I know that teachers are short on time, and so I appreciate and value your commitment to watching this. You will receive an email with another thank you, because we do in fact thank you, but also with the URLs to how to get back to these resources. Thank you.